name's Rachel Dobbs, and I'm going to be presenting my short video essay for the class Themes in Popular Culture. So my thesis is that underdog sports are disrupting the popularity of ascending sports in popular culture. To find my thesis a little bit more, I'm going to be talking about underdog sports and ascending sports. So I'm going to be specifically connecting underdog sports and ascending sports to the concepts we talked about in class, which is top down and bottom up. Underdog specifically is defined as somebody who's not predicted to win, and I'm connecting underdog sports to bottom up because it's something that is less known, less popular. So bottom up is typically talking about folk culture and things that are more popular in a smaller area. So the St. Jacobs Market, not everybody will know exactly what it is, but that area does. And then for top down, I'm talking about the more popular and ever ascending sports, so things that you always know, such as hockey. And I'm relating this to mass culture and the fact that it's related to mass industry because it's something that you will always know. Inherently, Canadians know the rules to hockey. My thesis is explicitly saying that bottom up and underdog sports are going to be overshadowing the top down and ascending sports. So I'm talking about this especially because we're seeing a lot of changes in the way that media is presented. So I'll be talking about this with 3 points, talking about sports culture in the media, power play, which is talking about sponsorship, as well as participatory media and public voice. So this is talking about how participation is changing in today's society. So one of the reasons I find this so interesting is actually because when I was watching curling the Olympics in 2015, one of the commentators noted that the viewer rating was higher than that of hockey that year. So specifically, it was 1.25 million people had tuned into the Brier in 2015, whereas there had been 422,000 people watching NHL. Granted, there were differences in the intensity of the event, but I found this specifically interesting because I'm a curler, and even though I've never played hockey before, I still know all the rules and how it goes. But I found that hockey players I knew, they know nothing about the curling world or how it works. So I figured that would be directly correlated in the way that viewers interact with television. But I'm finding that with the way that new media is being presented, it's a lot easier to engage in an underdog or bottom-up sport because it's becoming more accessible and you don't have to be an expert in that sport to engage with it. One of the first points I wanted to bring up is that certain sports are always considered to be more popular as to how they're portrayed in sports media. So I'm directly connecting this to the fact that with certain sports, you see them everywhere. This is in terms of advertisements, athletes being endorsed by companies, and brands using athletes in the commercials because they know that's how they're really going to pump it up to their audience and consumers. So I read an article called Sports Culture in the Media, and the whole first paragraph was going through your routine in the morning and the fact that from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, no matter your culture or experience, you're going to be interacting with these sporting media such as billboards, endorsed clothes, and even the fact that your cereal box is going to have somebody's brand behind it. So it's little things like that that are making top-down sports way more popular and a part of mass culture. So the topic of blood sports is interesting because that's something that we talked about in class as well in lectures 3 and 4. It is important to note that the blood aspect of sport, because people were participating in these sports because it was an easy way to get away with such brutality. It is satisfying a primal need that we were talking about. So when these people are able to play these sports, it's something that they can get all of their aggressions out in a socially acceptable way. Even though it may have been a socially acceptable way to get their aggressions out, these sports were starting in folk culture, so it's something that had to be revised in the 1800s, so closer to 1850, 1848 was when there was first rules for soccer. So it was the Trinity College of Cambridge established rules. We can also talk about a huge change when it came from that participatory environment. So when the whole town was going out and playing a game of shinny in the afternoon, that was way before the Industrial Revolution because the Industrial Revolution impacted the way that they were able to participate. So their areas for playing sports ended up getting moved, and then things started to get divided into classes as well. So this is something we can talk about more too, the fact that when a class is brought into it, it also creates that divide. The second point I'm going to be talking about refers to an article called Power Play, which was written by Raymond Boyle. So this article is specifically going through and talking about sponsorship and media and the role that that plays within competitive sport. I want to bring this specifically up because I think it is important to note that even with underdog sports, there is a lot of sponsorship involved, and that is how a lot of these companies are A, promoting through the media, and B, how these sports are able to become more popular because they do have this association with sponsorship. So in regards to sponsorship, there is a really important thing I also want to note, and just the pure fact that cross sports, it is both top-down and bottom-up sports, so more popular and less popular, that are getting similar sponsorships. So whether this is brand endorsement or players showing up for a commercial, even with curling, you have Jennifer Jones who represents Pinty's, and then with NHL, you have so many other players who show up in commercials as well. It's that representation that they have that really benefits A, the sport and the fact they're getting more people watching it when they see these commercials, and B, that brand, because the more people who watch the commercials, the more successful that product is going to be. So PowerPlay specifically cites that sponsorship is one of the most important marketing communications. So that's in chapter 3, and it is talking about the fact that in the market of sports sponsorship, it's rising every single year, and this growth is important not only for the companies who are benefiting from it, but the sporting world is also benefiting from it as well, because there are more people interested in creating promotional material, which then brings more people into the viewer ratings as well. So the third article I'm talking about is called Using Participatory Media and Public Voice to Encourage Civic Engagement. This was written by Howard Rheingold at Stanford University, and his thesis is essentially saying that young people who are interacting in society, they're using different forms of media to interact and participate in the way that society is presented, so in civic engagement. So the point that I really want to bring to light for this is that even though the way that people may be consuming sports may be changing, they're still using different types of media in order to participate, but then it comes to the definition of active or passive participation. So quickly to define active or passive, active is physically engaging in that sport, which is where we can talk about the folk culture and where the evolution of blood sports came in. And then passive is more of the watcher, so it's somebody who's watching a television program. It's somebody who may be an audience in a crowd for a football game. So in our society today, there's a lot changing in the way that people engage and participate. A huge change in this would be esports. So it's actually a venue where people will go somewhere and watch this huge competition of video games. So there are online forums for this as well, which again is expanding that participation because people are able to be more passive and engage in it from home, but it's still a point where they're able to engage in those blood sports, so they may not be physically hurting someone or playing that game, that is, they're not physically scoring the goal, but they may be using an avatar in a video game. They are still doing the controls, so they are still technically engaging that blood sport and satisfying that need. So passive engagement is important for underdog sports because it's something that is not only promoting different types of sports, but it's also promoting different ways to engage. So I think it's extremely important to look into different types of media because not only am I able to go watch curling online, but I'm also getting exposed to different genres and different types of sports. So an example of this is UFC and the fight between Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. It was a boxing fight versus UFC. So it was something that it was not only trying to expose you to both sides of the fight, but it was also presented on a live stream, and it's something that people of my generation are especially able to reflect on and compare, and it is important for bringing this awareness. So I would compare this to esports in the sense that it's something that is up and coming in terms of underdog sports, and this was just also a really good example to compare two sports. So they were really trying to broaden the audience and see if they could get an overlap from one participant, so if who's watching UFC, to go watch boxing as well. So to conclude, I wanted to talk about how underdog sports are rising popularity. So to go with our first point, media has a huge impact on this, not only with constant promotion, but endorsement for athletes. They are getting their word out there. When it comes to blood sports, it's something that we are able to give people that primal urge in a different way. So this connects to both participatory and media because they are able to engage in a passive way but still satisfy that primal need. That the way we are choosing to participate is changing. This is beneficial beneficial to underdog sports, and this is beneficial to sports that are not as known, such as esports. But this passive engagement is allowing more people to engage in something that they may not have been as interested in before, because it's expanding horizons. To bringing it back to the course concepts that we talked about, the top down and bottom up, I believe that we're moving more into the wired middle. This is seen through our participation and through our media. We are getting a lot more things through social media and through YouTube videos. So it's definitely important to note that it's not specifically things that are popular raining down, and it's not only homey cultural things that are rising up. It's becoming more of the wired middle, and it's represented through social media and through electronic presence, and it's the perfect ways that people who are participating passively can represent themselves as well. I don't believe that fully underdog sports are going to overtake ascending sports. I think my points have given merit to the fact that they are up and coming and they're becoming more popular for people to watch. But when it comes to which sport will still be the most popular forever, I believe that ascending sports still ring true. It is something that you can't take away the credit that they already have.